Hey there, welcome to Spectrum Pulse, where we talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today it's a big one, the sophomore album from Cardi B. Am I the drama? I think we have to acknowledge that Cardi B's invasion of privacy being as well executed and acclaimed as it was in 2018 may have been a curse in disguise. You wouldn't think that, given how it vaulted her into A-list conversations over the course of those couple of years, including a lot of critics and the Grammys falling over themselves to award her alongside generational wealth, and with some promising momentum heading into the 2020s with huge culture-defining singles. But that sets up big expectations for the follow-up, especially if she was waiting a couple of years to do it. And that was kind of weird for me because I really like Cardi B as a presence in mainstream hip-hop. She's not a personal favorite of mine or anything, and I still think Invasion of Privacy is decent, not great, but she's funny, she knows her way around a hook, she can play New York Imperial, but is just as willing to get scrappy and brazenly sexual. She didn't short-circuit her initial momentum with a bunch of underpowered pop crossovers. Well, at least at first. But Cardi B's trajectory has started skidding off the rails probably around 2021. I'm convinced there was something close to an album ready to go with Atlantic around that year, then she got pregnant again, and the lingering pandemic would have made touring a nightmare, and surely they could sustain traction following WAP and Up on more singles, right? So we're now in late September 2025, and they bucketed WAP and Up onto the back of this album, and for the life of me, I'm having a really hard time pinpointing all the blame. Does Cardi have some of it? Absolutely. Getting offline, off of social media, away from the perennial frustration of Offset should have been priorities. But if she wants to have time at home to be a good mom and her cash flow's robust, she never owed the fans another album. No, who I was immediately looking at here was Atlantic, because the rollout of Invasion of Privacy nailed all the stops. One of the best executed promotional campaigns of the 2010s. So how do you fumble career-defining momentum off of WAP to take 5 years to put out the damn album? There have been artists who have had star-making careers and lost them in between Cardi B albums. So yeah, I was really worried about Am I the Drama? Not against leaning into the public perception, and maybe the logic is that you need 21 songs to satiate the fans after such a long wait, with the expectations that this album is going to have the runway post-release because you can mine the project for what songs get the streaming hype. And I don't know, maybe Atlantic needs proof for the right ones to catch fire, which is a huge assumption given the set of releases that Cardi is going to have to compete against in the weeks to come, especially when she had groundbreaking singles. But enough of that. How did this turn out? Well, here's the big problem. If Invasion of Privacy was an example of a major label-driven hip-hop rollout done right, Am I the Drama is the unfortunate struggle of trying and mostly failing to capitalize on that rollout and the project being delayed over the course of years, which leaves the weird case of it constantly trying to chase where rap is rather than chart her own unique lane, plus fulfill a bunch of predetermined label obligations that feel like the worst sort of trading favors. I'm reminded distinctly of when video game critic Yahtzee Croshaw back in 2011 described the feel of playing Duke Nukem Forever, where you can play through the game and see every era that the game was chasing with a little bit built every single time, but none of it completed, and then the desperate process of stitching it all together, where at the end there's this weird feeling that it was also kind of rushed. Well, for an album where the development time was about half of a Duke Nukem Forever, I can hear the exact same problem. And while it's nowhere near as bad as that game was, because Cardi B's floor is a lot higher as she's ultimately the anchor point, and there were moments of tangible quality that set this up, WAP being the best song here is both a gift and a curse, it suffers from that same stark juxtaposition of expectations that game did, where even if the quality feels mostly equivalent, the flaws stand out all the more because, again, we were waiting 7 years. And let's start off with the biggest problem. The album has major issues with length, sequencing, and momentum. Where Invasion of Privacy understood that vibrant color and Cardi B having fun is the greatest asset, Am I the Drama immediately stymies that in the loosest possible arc, describing her split from Offset, then hooking up with Stephon Diggs, all the while settling grudges and flexing on all the haters. Set up to answer the big question of, Am I the Drama in the album's title with, okay, yeah, maybe, but the bigger problem is that you're really not helping yourself either way. Sure, it probably feels good in the moment to dunk on all the haters, but does Cardi sound like she's having that much fun clapping back at JT on Magnet or Bia on Pretty and Petty or the passing subs at Nicki Minaj, especially when it has the irritating feeling of taking out the trash? If you're gonna spend so much time flexing from your new peak in fashion and wealth and prosperity, not exactly my favorite lane for Cardi B, when she's considerably more compelling when she's loose and funny and populous, not having to put on airs, why bother give those beneath you the time of day and the runtime on your already overlong album? I don't think they're worth it. Of course, it's because that's when the album picks up more creative verve in the bars. The label has to capitalize. At least in the disses, Cardi sounds more invested and sharp and creatively venomous, even if she's not having that much fun. Not as bored as the god-awful pop collaboration with Selena Gomez, and especially with Lizzo, where they bastardize What's Up by Four Non Blondes in trying to recreate the overly obvious sample-driven hook that was already driven into the ground 3 years ago. That's what I mean about this album showing the skeletons of previous development cycles that were never completed. Pick It Up not only feels dated, where Selena Gomez herself isn't even trying to sound like this anymore, but What's Going On with Lizzo? It sounds like a desperate label note in order to give Lizzo's flailing career a shot in the arm. On a badly bloated album, you don't need obvious bad ideas, where I'm also going to flow the awkward Jay-Z flip from Imaginary Playerz from nobody's favorite Jay-Z album. Then there are both of the Janet Jackson samples, the first on the slow burn ballad On My Back, which would be fine if JPEG Mafia didn't flip the exact same record way better last year. Then on the bait and switch of Principle, where the feature credit is just a more prominent sample that's pressed through this contorted buzzy film that really tested my patience, did not sound all that good, and that naturally takes us to the production, where the tagline might as well be expensive sounding, but kind of haphazard in the details. To be fair, this was the exact same problem that Invasion of Privacy had, with inconsistent mixing and mastering choices. I really wish more folks brought that up, and outside of What's Going On or the rinky-dink Pick It Up or Nice Guy with Tyla, there's generally a little bit more polish, but there's a difference that comes with 7 years of build-up. I should not feel like there are songs here to pad the runtime that feel this rushed or superfluous. On the plus side, Dead with the klaxon and the bells-driven crescendo intro, it follows in the wake of Get Up 10. Cardi can nail that sort of intro to an album, even if Summer Walker's canned vocal mixing remains one of my biggest pet peeves in R&B. She thankfully sounds a bit better on Shower Tears, even if the rest of the pickups on that song sound really awkwardly blended, borderline demo quality. And Bodega Baddie has the sort of vibrant Latin flair with the horns and the up-tempo Jersey club groove that feels like both a natural follow-through to I Like It and Cardi showing a sharper bounce in her flow. I would have tripled down on this instead of treating it like a glorified interlude that barely runs 2 minutes. Hell, you'd think she would keep up the pace, add more color, instead of the dreary whir of Salute. I mean, I'd skip that and go straight to the drill of Safe with Kehlani. They're a natural pair, but alongside Salute and opposite the blaring and more aggressive club joints that flatter Cardi's energy way more, think Hello flipping shoddy low, or Outside, which works considerably better in the album's context, or ErrTime as a loud, swaggering trap banger I rather liked. There's a slew of desaturated bassy cuts that feel built for the strip club, but could have been cut in an afternoon and are generally forgettable outside of Cardi. Trophies is probably the most obnoxious and aggressive of these. probably the best for it. But there's also Check Please and Killin You Hoes, the latter of which would have been pretty effective if it was actually an album closer and on a dark, menacing note. But it's followed by both Up and WAP, considerably better songs, and the last of which is probably still the best song on this album 5 years later. And that's the other huge problem. For an album of this length to be so short on introspection, removed from the breakdown of the relationship with Offset, where admittedly Cardi's trying to handle it as maturely as possible given her kids and Takeoff's death, although saying that she was prioritizing her music feels a little incongruous with the entire release timeline of this album, where if Invasion of Privacy was opening up the door to her life, this was the chance to invite the audience in, sample more of your story. Cardi still feels a step away from carving deeper into what could have been a lot more compelling territory, and she had the time to do it. If you are indeed the drama, and you're just rolling with that so long as everyone's talking about you, why not reflect on what that means? Not just for you, but for your kids, your partners, or just the lane of rappers you've created. I don't think it's asking too much when you want to paint this world so vividly, revel in the melodrama, that you add a little bit more dimension or complexity to that world, especially when peers like Megan Thee Stallion, Doechii, even Glorilla are doing that, and it's not taken away from their flexes in that lane. It might have been why there was tension with Atlantic to deliver a project that feels so thematically incomplete, and with limited purpose in doing so, especially given how much Atlantic bankrolled on turning Cardi B into an A-list act. As someone who likes Invasion of Privacy to this day, let's be real, it was never built to carry the cultural weight it now does, and that's just fine. It was a good debut. It didn't need to be more than that. But if Cardi B is indeed the drama, the focal point of all the mess that social media has only continuously amplified, including beefs where she's in mid-strife, well, vulnerability is probably the last thing she wants because she knows it's gonna be, or already has been, turned against her. The drama always being on offense is that survival mechanism. But it's also a losing battle stretched out over the course of years, especially because if this album had been dropped 4 years ago, it would have given Cardi more grace to be who she is, not who Atlantic is desperate to make her, which is why this album feels so bloated and compromised at every turn. And you know what, that's a goddamn shame, because if you strip away all the chaff, there's a pretty good album here, where you can even keep some of the Offset drama with the watery steel drums and the tinny acoustics on Man of Your Word, or the softer shower tears at the midpoint, with On My Back and Finding New Affection for Stephon Diggs, now along with a truly baffling implication of where she is going to hold his penis. Good luck on the Patriots this year, dude. You're gonna need it, especially as it now makes the Boston jab on Pretty and Petty kind of land a little less, but that's overthinking it. And dead serious, if this album was a lean half hour with the strongest song forward, just a lot of like catty bangers, maybe some fun sex songs, it wouldn't have been great. It wouldn't have been close to measuring up to the insane hype potential that Atlantic dumped on Cardi B, but it would have set her ceiling way more realistically, probably better for everyone involved. Hell, it probably would have been better on aggregate than Invasion of Privacy. That would have been great. But Am I the Drama feels so at odds with itself on so many levels that I wish the pileup was just more compelling and likable for everyone involved. Multiple shifts in the mainstream sound pushing against the street-level strip club hits where Cardi excels. Attempts at pop crossover where Cardi already proved she didn't really need that formula to win on multiple singles in the late 2010s. So her disinterest is juxtaposed with petty squabbles where at least the melodrama's kind of compelling. And even then, when it comes to the relationship drama, all of it feels so overexposed and played out because we saw it all on social media, not nearly as compelling as it should be allowed to be. Most often by circumstance, but also by Cardi and Atlantic just not getting out of their own way. So I can't really say the album works beyond pieces. On structure and low points alone, it's a step back, but not a disastrous one. Although this being successful in the charts to come is bound to have a lot of people learn the wrong lessons. In the meantime, if you don't like Cardi B, this will definitely not change your mind. But if you do like this formula, there's a lot more of it here. You've also heard the best of it before. You might wind up disappointed. That's all. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. Not gonna lie, this album was really difficult to talk about because again, it felt like it was being built of multiple eras and kind of is not the best of any of them. I really wanted to like this a lot. I still think that a great Cardi B album could have dropped in 2021 if she hadn't gotten pregnant and probably would have kept the momentum so we wouldn't have needed this, but again, woulda, coulda, shoulda, and honestly, I think the dissection or the documentary behind this album is kind of going to wind up more interesting than a lot of the songs here. Again, stream this down to about 11 songs, it'd probably be much better. But hey, leave your comments down there below. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if y'all want to get projects on my schedule or support the channel, or just yell at me on my Discord. Link to my Patreon and YouTube memberships is right over there. Don't feel obligated. Tough times out there, I understand, but the option's available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.